What will the South Africa Rugby Championship squad be? Rassie Erasmus is going to name it tomorrow as I record this, I believe. You know, some people tell you that there's too much rugby, that players should play less. And I mean, strictly speaking, I think they're probably right. But at the same time, I also love the fact that rugby is basically year-round right now. And there's always something to grab our attention and for us to talk about here on the channel. And I want to talk about this because the Rugby Championship squads are going to start getting announced. I think Australia is also this week, New Zealand next week. Not sure about Argentina, but the first of them, because he's always the first one to name his squad. It's just what Rassie does. Rassie Erasmus is going to name his Rugby Championship squad. So I've got my thoughts on who I expect the players in the box squad to be. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. I'm Tim. Leave your comments down below. Give the video a thumbs up and hit subscribe. I'm going to do this as I'm coming back to South Africa for the Rugby Championship games against New Zealand in Johannesburg and Cape Town, of course. Loved my trip there, and I thought while I'm debating this, I might brought that back with me. So cheers. Let's get into the box squad then. Right, props. So actually, before I get into that quickly. So I was trying to work out how big will this squad be and how many players will there be in certain positions? It's really hard to tell. So I looked 2 years ago, before the Rugby World Cup, when there was no Rugby World Cup on the horizon, and South Africa named over 40 players. I think it was 43 players in total, 25 forwards. I don't know if they'll do that again. They may. So I'm going to work on the basis that they'll go for around about 38. Maybe it might push to 40, but that's my thinking. So with that in mind, the props, I mean, I'm expecting the Spicy Plum to be back in the mix. Oxenche and Stephen Kitsoff, the loose head props. Frans Malherbe and Vincent Koch, the two first choice tight head props. Outside of that, who do you expect to see in the squad? I mean, you're thinking Gerhard Steenekamp, if you want another loose head prop. Thomas du Toit, if you want another tight head prop. Trevor Nyakane, Mkunu might be a shout as well. All of those would be really good. When you think of the players that are outstanding and not making the cut, like Wilco Low and Neitling Fushia, it's insane levels of depth. You could go just with Thomas du Toit and then you've got a player who can play on both sides of the scrum. I'm thinking these guys will be in, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's 8 props or 7. But yeah, an embarrassment of riches there for South Africa. Would love to know what you think. Help me out with that one, because honestly, haven't got a clue. A little bit easier at hooker. Malcolm Marx, hoping that he gets back fit from his injury. I think it's hopefully not too long a time out on the sideline for him. Bongi and Benambi, obviously. I thought Grobbelaar did enough to warrant his place continuing in the squad at the weekend. And then you've got, well, a potential prop hooker hybrid in Jan-Hendrik Wessels. And like I say, there are plenty of other options there as well. But definitely 3, possibly 4. Rassie Erasmus has said, hasn't he, that he may send different players to Australia than the ones that play in the games against New Zealand in South Africa. So that could be a part to play. He could almost have some players that he keeps in South Africa and some that he sends off. He's got enough players to do it. Lock, these would have been the 4 if Franco Mostert hadn't broken his leg. A small fracture, but a fracture nonetheless, which will keep him out. I think it was 6 weeks minimum he was expected to be out, so he will miss certainly the first few weeks of the Rugby Championship. What do South Africa do there? I'm wondering if actually, because in previous squads, Ruben van Heerden, who I would love to see in, and Ruan Nortje for the Bulls, neither of those were involved previously, which leads me to believe that neither of them are going to be involved maybe now. So it may well be just those 3 again. We will see on that front. Your thoughts down below in the comments. Into the back row. And again, if you go 2 in each position, then the loosies become pretty easy to pick. Khaleesi and Van Staden. Pieter-Steph du Toit, who is apparently going to be fit to travel to Australia if selected for that trip. And Ben Jason Dixon, who is basically marked himself out and carved a little spot in the squad as the Pieter-Steph du Toit clone, which is great news for South Africa. And number 8's Jasper Wiese, I expect to be back in, and Quacker Smith, who kind of covers all positions, and maybe we'll go back to his bomb squad spot. We'll see on that. But I also think they're going to take Evan Ruiz because Rassie seems to have invested a lot of time in him. I don't think he enhanced his reputation massively at the weekend against Portugal, particularly when he got ripped going for a bit of white line fever, got ripped, and then Portugal went and scored. That didn't help his reputation at all. Ruan Fenter, I like the look of that guy, and if you wanted someone that could potentially slot in at second row as well, he could be a shout. But then there are others. Elric Lowe. When's Cam Hanekom coming back and fit? And if you pick one or both of those players, then which one of these guys do you drop out? Or is Rassie Erasmus going to take 10 back row players? I think at some point, this is the difficulty for South Africa. They have got so much talent that you have to make a pick, and good players have to be left out. So if I've gone for those 8, if you wanted Elric Lowe in, who do you drop? That's where it becomes a difficult question. But this is kind of roughly what I'm anticipating seeing. But let's see. So yeah, potentially Ruan Fenter isn't there. I'd say he's one that I would take. I'm not expecting to see him in the squad, but because he could potentially slot in at lock, that might be a shout. But yeah, it could be Elric Lowe, or could be none of them. It could be all of them. It could be Pepsi Buthelezi. I haven't even mentioned him at this point. Crikey, they've got some talent. Anyway, this is what I'm kind of expecting. So going back through that, what we're looking at, 8 back row players, 3 locks, that's 11, 3 or 4 hookers, that's 14 or 15, and 6 to 8 props. So now you're into the early 20s in terms of your squad number. You can understand why they might take a squad approaching 40 names. Into the backs then, much easier. You got your 3 scrum halves that were there at the Rugby World Cup. They've been ever present. They're all class players. There's a good argument to talk about who actually deserves the starting spot, and I think Grant Williams is playing himself into that role potentially. Maybe even Cobus Reinach. Faf has been there and done it, and he's trusted in the big games, so we'll see. But I also think Morné van den Berg will stay as well, just to change the age profile of those half-backs overall. And van den Berg, someone who could nudge one of those players out of the squad in the years to come. So again, someone that it seems to me like Rassie Erasmus is investing time in. And as I mentioned previously, when it was the test matches against Ireland, the one in Pretoria, it was Morné van den Berg who appeared to be the 3rd choice scrum half, who was the travelling replacement and warmed up with the squad, and then was doing the fitness drills on the pitch afterwards. So that says to me, again, that they've got something marked out for him. Fly half, Handré Pollard, obviously. Sacha Feinberg and Gomazulu, you cannot look past him because he's got the running game of Marnie Lebok. He's got the kicking game of Handré Pollard. But they're going to take Marnie Lebok as well, because he is outstanding. And he does have to address his goal kicking. You see, other countries, when I look at it, have sometimes centres, fullbacks, wingers even, scrum halves who can goal kick. With South Africa, it seems to be the goal kicking. You know, there was Percy Montgomery in years gone by and other players, but it seems to be it's the job of the 10 to goal kick. And when it comes down to tight games, away in Australia, potentially, certainly home against New Zealand, goal kicking is going to be massive. And that might mean Marnie Lebok misses out in the actual test matches, but he's worth his place in the squad, isn't he? Centres would have been easy. Andre Esterhuizen, don't know how long his ban, if any, is going to be, so we'll wait and see on that one. But you've got 2 tried and tested inside centres and outside centres. And if if Esterhuizen is not involved, then I wonder if it will just be those 3. Who else is there that is coming through? Obviously, if Willemse was fit and available, he could slot in at 12. Sacha Feinberg and Gomazulu, a lot of people have been suggesting he could play 12 and change the dynamic of the South African game. That is one of the things, in fact, I'll touch on that in a minute, the style of play for South Africa. Back 3, looks like Edville van der Merwe will continue to be injured, and same goes, as I mentioned, for Damian Willemse. Kanan Moody looks like he's going to be available, and I expect that to be the case. 4 wingers, Mapimpi Moody, Colby Arendse, guys involved in the World Cup, Willie Leroux, and without Damian Willemse, Apelele Fassi to get a spot. If Willemse was there, maybe Fassi would be involved as well. Willie Leroux closing in on 100 caps. I know there's no place for sentimentality in sport. Ultimately, you earn every single cap you get. But I wonder if there is just a thought, even if Villiers Leroux wasn't the player you wanted to pick, which he is definitely worth his spot, I wonder whether just a little bit of sentimentality might creep in. You're like, let's get Villiers' 100th cap. He's earned it. And he has. And he will earn it on merit. Those are my thoughts on the squad. Like I say, I mean, how long's a piece of string? How big is the Springbok squad going to be? Are there any names that I haven't mentioned that you would have in the squad? I'm thinking maybe Ruben van Heerden, Ruan Nortje, second row. That's going to be an interesting one at lock to discuss. Any other players that I've not mentioned that are worth a spot? And how are South Africa, this is the final question, are South Africa in a little bit of a building phase where they're not 100% sure what their identity was? What won South Africa 2 World Cups is that when they took to the field in those 2 World Cups, they knew, and the opposition knew, exactly what South Africa were all about. You knew exactly what you were going to get. And they were good enough that even though the opposition knew what they were going to get, they weren't able to stop it. South Africa, it feels like, are trying to evolve. How much of that is down to the players that they've got, that they're trying to get the best out of? How much is that down to the World Rugby law changes that they're trying to adapt to? Tony Brown's there, obviously. The selection, I think, will give us a bit of an indication about just how far and what that identity is going to be. For what it's worth, from my perspective, I think South Africa has always been so good at the things it's really, really good at. Set piece, forward play, that they shouldn't stray too far from it. But they absolutely have got total game breakers. When you think in the future there could be a back line with Feinberg and Ngomazulu and Willemse and Lucanio Am and Cheslin Colby and Grant Williams and Apolele Fassi, and who are the absolute game breakers behind the scrum. And if they can perfect that mean, horrible, nasty pack and game breakers in the backs, they're in business. That's what they're searching for. And yeah, we'll wait and see what we read into it when the squad is announced. Those are my thoughts. I'll finish this while I read the comments. So leave yours down below. Hit subscribe. Give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. Like I say, Australia's teams coming this week. New Zealand and Argentina before long. Rugby keeps on coming, and so do the videos.